Hey, I'm Pastor Robert. Welcome to Riverside Friends Church. Today, we're going to be looking at the book of Job and continuing our look into the wisdom literature. So, in ancient Israel, a man told a story about a sheep and two men. Once upon a time, a rich man stole the only sheep, the beloved sheep, from a poor man. And when the king heard the story, he he hated the rich man for abusing the poor man. He wanted the rich man arrested and put in jail. And it was only then that the prophet Nathan revealed to King David that he was the rich man who stole the wife Bathsheba from the poor man, Uriah. And David, of course, says, I have sinned against the Lord, which, let's be honest, that's kind of like the weakest apology there is, right? I've sinned against the Lord. Dude, you've stolen this dude's wife. You've taken her and been pretty abusive towards her. Like, you've used your power as king to get her. And not to mention, like, you've sinned against the people of Israel by doing this wrongly. And to say, like, I've sinned against the Lord, that's a pretty weak apology and doesn't acknowledge really the wrong that you've done against Uriah, against Bathsheba, or against the people of Israel. But David says, I've sinned against the Lord. That's not what. All right, today we're going to talk about stories and their power and how we hold stories as a community. Because when I begin a story with once upon a time in a land far, far away, what am I saying? I'm telling a fairy tale. And we know about fairy tales. And the beautiful thing about like fairy tales and stories is that they tell us something true about not just the characters in the story, but they tell us something true about ourselves. Good fairy tales, they disarm us to see things that would have gone unnoticed. David could not hear that he was evil. His evilness had to be revealed through the story of a rich man stealing the beloved sheep from a poor man. David had these assumptions about who he was as a person. He had assumptions about how the world works. He was settled on his position. We're going to use that word settled or settlement. It's going to be an important kind of concept as we get into Job. And so today, like, we move into the book of Job, and Job exists as the story that protests a settlement, a theotic settlement. There's an assumption in the wisdom literature that we've learned in Proverbs. Proverbs makes the claim, follow wisdom, it will lead to life. Follow folly, and it will lead to death. That's what we call theotic settlement. It says that the world works on morality, that if you do good, you get good. And yet we know that there are evil people that prosper and good people that suffer. And the book of Job protests the settlement that the book of Proverbs offers. And so Job is a story. It's dramatic fiction. It doesn't try to be history, it's theater. It's like a stage play that shares an alternate reality and invites us to reimagine our explanations of our reality. Like the story of David, who can only see how bad his sin is when Nathan exposes it, and the story of the sheep. Job is this stage play that invites us to see how bad our theology is around wisdom. And it does so across these 42 chapters. So we're going to take the next 5 weeks to break down the book into its sections. And today I get to tackle chapters 1 and 2. If that feels like a lot, like if tackling 2 chapters feels like a lot, next week Evan is going to cover chapters 3 to 27. So good luck, Evan. So let me read for you the first 5 verses of Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1, this is the introduction. This is the introduction to the introduction. Job chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. He had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So the first line of Job is brilliant, and it begins with an interesting statement that invites us to hold our understanding of the world in suspension. Job 1:1, there once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. Where is Uz? Is Uz in Israel? No. Uz is beyond the known realm of Israel. Uz is somewhere else. By beginning by saying this story takes place like somewhere else in a land far, far away, we are invited to let our guard down and to consider that their world may work differently than ours. And so what it does is it invites us to suspend our world, to say, and in that first line, in the land of Uz, in a land far, far away, in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we go, oh, okay, this isn't us. This isn't our world. So it invites us to say, ooh, this is somewhere else. And in the next phrase, we hear that Job is blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned from evil. This is a quote. This is a quote from Proverbs 3:7 and from Psalms 37:37. And so what we see then is that the blameless and upright, they're scheduled for prosperity. That's what those verses say. That's what Proverbs 3:7 and Psalms 37:37 say. And so by quoting this here and saying that Job was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned from evil, we know that he is scheduled for peace and prosperity. That's how it works. And so simultaneously, this one sentence, the first sentence of Job, invites the audience of Job's play to hold the world they know in suspense. This is the land of Uz, and who is going to prosper is unknown. And it invites a question: does the world work the same way there as it does here? And for this reason, this is my favorite sentence in the entire Bible. This is my favorite sentence in the entire Bible because it packs so much into so few words. It is brilliant. The invitation here, there once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned from evil. My favorite sentence in the Bible. Because if we don't understand this sentence, we will always misunderstand the book of Job. The worldview of the audience says Job should be blessed, and he is. He has thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. His kids get together without him all the time, and they have fun together. If you're a parent, you know how hard it can be for your kids to get along. And these 10 adult children of Job, they get together all the time. And Job, being a follower of God, he doesn't know if his kids have cursed God and cursed the Lord in their hearts. The text doesn't say they have, and it doesn't even seem like they have. But either way, Job takes the time to offer up sacrifices to God for them. And so what we see is that everything in the story is as it is meant to be. This story makes sense to the early Israelites that heard it. It is how it is supposed to be. Job is blameless and upright, and so he is blessed, and he is the greatest man of the East, is what the text says. And the audience of Job in ancient Israel, they would understand this all intuitively. They wouldn't need a pastor to explain it to them. And so far what we see is that the world in Uz, the world of Uz, wherever that is, it makes sense. It works like our world works. But we still hold it in suspension because it's a story. And so everything for Job was just as the world expected. He was respected above all people. He had everything a man who follows God was supposed to have. The story makes sense so far. But unknown to Job, there is another drama underway in heaven. A story that he does not see. I'm going to read this next part and unpack it as we go. This is Job chapter 1, verse 6 to 22. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And this statement here can be hard to understand because the word Satan here is the Hebrew word for accuser. So we could really translate this as, and the accuser also came with them. And the Lord said to the accuser, where have you come from? It is not as though God is surprised by Satan being there, nor that God did not know where Satan was. This is a line in here, I think. This is how God begins the conversation to move the story along. The accuser, Satan, answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. So it is God who brings up Job first, not Satan, and God has great things to say about Job. So we can know that they're true. We can know that God says it, so it's true. Reading on, does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the works of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now, stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. So this is the crux of the book. God's character and Job's character are both questioned by the accuser, by Satan. Is God so good that he can be loved for himself and not just his gifts? Can a man hold on to God when there are no benefits attached, when he has lost everything? The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. And so God accepts the challenge. Satan is given permission to do what he wants to Job, but not to Job himself. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties, swept down on your camels, and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And while he was speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Everything that was promised and given because Job was upright and feared the Lord has been lost. And Job has no idea about the happenings between God and Satan. Job isn't told about that. He doesn't know it. He doesn't see it. He doesn't understand what's happening. At this, reading on, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. So Job, he gets up. I want to make this note here. Job gets up, tears his robe, shaves his head. These are the common ways to mourn. And this was expected of Job. This is how Job would have thought to mourn. This is what was expected. You tear your robe, you shave your head. That's what mourning looks like. And then contrasting, like, we have this idea of getting up, tearing your robe, shaving your head. We contrast that with the falling down to the ground and worshiping. Those were not normal. That was not the normal way to mourn. And I think what happens here by showing this like rising and falling, this rising of getting up, tearing his robe, shaving his head, That's upward movement. You rise up, then your robe, then your head, upward movement, then you fall down and worship. Downward movement. Kind of this like juxtaposition here, because it's taking what was expected and turning it around. He was expected to get up. He was expected to tear his robe, expected to shave his head. He was not expected to fall down and not expected to worship. And Job here shows how pious he is. He shows how faithful he really is. Job sees God's hand in this. There are no accidents in a universe ruled by a sovereign Lord. And Job recognizes that more than anybody else in the story. Such tragedies are not a problem for the polytheist, for the dualist, for the atheist, for the naturalist, or the agnostic. These are expected in a world ruled by chaos and chance. These are tragedies, to be sure, but not a problem. To us who follow and believe in a sovereign Lord who rules over the universe, these are a problem. Suffering, whether caused by human wickedness or the forces of nature, is a problem only for the believers in one Creator who is good and almighty. So the problem arises in a distinct moral monotheism. It's a problem we have to deal with. Because Satan only appears in this small section of Job, and his role is tiny, it's insignificant. For the rest of the book, people will look at and talk to Job about why he is suffering. That's what the rest of the book is about why has Job suffered so much. And they will never mention Satan or evil forces or a diabolical foe. In fact, Satan never appears in the book of Job again. Satan, the accuser, is here in Job to provide a start to the question, but not an answer. It would be wrong to think that the book of Job is trying to teach us that human suffering is caused by the accuser, by the devil, by Satan. That's not the point. There is evil here, but not dualism. Dualism says that God and Satan are in this cosmic battle fighting over the fate of people in the world, but that's not the biblical case. We make the devil too big if we go that direction. Satan is a creature created. He can only do what God permits him to do. We have not come to the answer yet. There is more to the question. Job has lost everything he has, but he retains his health. And chapter 2, it replays the scene. It replays the scene of Satan and the angels presenting themselves to God. And God again says to Satan, look at Job. He has maintained his faithfulness, even as he has lost everything. Satan responds, if he were sick, he would curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, this is Job chapter 2 now, verses 6 to 10. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he's in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. And then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. And his wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. And he replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Now, I don't think we could be hard on Job's wife, but I don't think we should. She just lost her children and her wealth. She has also lost everything. And now her husband is sick with sores from head to toe. I think we can probably give her some grace. Job believes that she is foolish. She has taken the path of Proverbs that is foolishness. Job is now quoting Proverbs. And his wife is taking the path of foolishness, of folly. We've been talking about this for the last 5 weeks, if you're not tracking. Satan's prediction in all of this did not come true. Satan said, if you take away his stuff, he'll curse you to your faith. If you take away his health, he'll curse you to your faith. Job did not sin. He was still blameless. Now, some people have wrongly thought that because it says Job did not sin in what he said, he must have sinned in his heart. That would be wrong. That goes against the entire point of the book of Job. That takes the position of Job's friends. We're going to see in the next number of weeks that Job's friends, they're going to talk about that Job has suffered and he has not sinned. Job's friends take this position that say, you must have sinned because you're suffering. That's not what's happening here. We know that Job hasn't sinned because it says Job hasn't sinned. Now, we have all experienced loss. And none of us, though, have experienced the highest highs and the lowest lows of Job in such a short amount of time. And we all know what it is to lose the meaning of our lives, to lose the meaning in our lives, to have those things that matter to us be taken away. That's happened to us. This part of Job is difficult to read and consider. It's hard because it leaves us with questions, but that's the point of the introduction, is to raise these questions for us. And so we're invited to consider this first line, that beautiful first sentence that shines forth. This is the land of Uz. This is a man who is blameless and upright. And does the world really work this way? And so we're invited to hold and suspend our understanding of how our world works. Because the story takes place in the land of Uz, we can sympathize with Job while still maintaining a distance from him. He's not here with us, and so we're able to see the story at a distance because it takes place somewhere else. And we see Job as an upright man worthy of blessings, and he is. He receives more than anybody else. He's the richest person in the East, and then he loses it all for a reason that is unknown to him. And this unknown element and uncertainty is part of the point. We have to grasp that the book of Job is designed to evoke an uncertainty in the audience, and it should evoke an uncertainty in us. How does God allow this? Why does God allow this? What's happening with Job? What's going to happen to Job? How can we comfort Job? We understand the book of Job through uncertainty. That's the point. The book of Job is what's called a polyphonic dialogic. Polyphonic dialogic. Okay. Those are fancy words, but if we don't grasp this concept, we'll likely make the book of Job into something it's not. Polyphonic means many voices. Poly means many, phonic means voices. And there are several voices, several characters in the story of the book of Job. Job is upright, he's moral, he's good, he fears the Lord, he doesn't sin. There is a God who is supreme, ruler of the universe. People answer to him. God does not answer to others. There is Job's wife, and she starts a tune that's going to be carried into the next 25 chapters by Job's friends. Because Job's going to have 3 friends. They're going to come and they're going to speak to him and they're going to say the same things. They're going to talk in the same way that Job's wife has spoken. Job's wife and Job's 3 friends that we'll learn about next week, they have this moral imagination, a moral imagination that echoes that of Proverbs. The wisdom of Proverbs says, try this, it works. If you do what's right, you'll be blessed. That's what Proverbs says. And Job's response is, I did, and it doesn't. And his friends are going to answer back saying, Job, you must have sinned. You must have sinned in your heart. You must have. You must have sinned because people don't lose everything unless they sin. So you must have sinned, and now you need to repent. There's a hidden character. And so we have Job, we have God as characters, we have these friends and Job's wife. There's a hidden character that we don't often consider. There's a narrator who knows everything that is happening, and the narrator is speaking to us. We know that Job hasn't sinned. The narrator has told us so. And God will affirm the narrator later on. The narrator tells us, the audience, about what is happening on earth with Job and his friends, but also what's happening in heaven. We get a unique view that is denied to Job. And all of these voices, the voice of Job, the voice of God, the voice of the narrator, the voice of the friends, they all speak from a different perspective, and they are in tension with one another. That's the nature of being polyphonic. They have all of these different voices in tension. That's what it's like by being a polyphonic dialogic. Dialogic just meaning dialogue. There's all these voices in tension. Job will affirm his innocence from here out, and the friends will maintain that Job must have sinned. And I think our modern thought, we struggle to see Job as polyphonic dialogical truth in this way. And it's because we intuitively look for what's called monological truth. Monological meaning one. We, as modern people, we tend to look for unifying principles. We tend to say, oh, how does this all relate? And we want to have this one idea that ties everything together. And in that, we tend to think about truth as propositional, as systematic, as comprehensible by one person. If you think about math, we can know math propositions that 1 + 1 is 2, and 1 × 1 is 1. And we can know mathematics as a systems of thinking and algorithms. There's a way of doing math that it only takes one person to know math. Math is monological truth. But Job represents a polyphonic dialogical truth. Polyphonic dialogical truth requires multiple people to hold it. It's abstract, but it's embodied in a community. It doesn't drift towards systems, but toward events. It is open and unfinished. It's hard to understand it. Instead of it being this unifying theory of everything, it is broad and perspective-wise. You all are familiar with a polyphonic dialogical truth system. You don't know it, but you are. It's the church. The church is a polyphonic dialogical truth system. The church doesn't work like 1 + 1, and if I apply this algorithm to this person, they'll become like this other person or something. In this way, the book of Job is about us as much as it's about a man 2,500 years ago or 4,000 years ago or whatever. The challenge of Job is about our community. What grand story do we believe? What grand story do we hold on to? I think Job is an ancient story that goes back to the time of Abraham, that was compiled in its current form just after the exile 2,500 years ago, when people were trying to make sense of how God had allowed them to fall and to lose the promised land and now has brought them back. And they have to make sense of their world that has radically changed. And the people of ancient Israel are figuring out how to live their lives in this new system. They believed that if they did good, they would get good. And Job challenges that notion of a morally guided world. It invites God's people to consider how they follow God and what they believe about God. And that's the invitation that we have today. The church is a polyphonic dialogical truth system. All of us together hold the truth about our church. There is no one person that contains the truth of the church or can tell the truth about the church. What one person experiences of the church is not the entire truth about the church. Instead, the truth about our church is contained inside all of us, and all of our voices speaking about it tell the truth about it. And so in that way, we are invited to become the church, to embody the church. And in our becoming, we change the church. For ancient Israel, they believed that if you follow wisdom, it will work. Try it, it works. They reduced being moral into a determinative moral framework that said, if you're good, you will get good things. They took, hey, it's good to be moral, and they changed it. And they said, if you're moral, not only is it good to be moral, but they made it determinative by saying, if you're good, you will get good things. That's how the world works. And their worldview is broken. They had this grand narrative that said, try it, it works. And if it's not working, that means you must have done something wrong. The problem's with you, not with the world. And so their worldview was flawed and broken. And the question for us today is, what grand narrative is our church living? What is the story that we believe most and live as though it's true? I can tell you what I hope, but I can't tell you what's true for our church because we all hold it individually and in different perspectives. Here's what I hope is the grand narrative of our church. A dialogical system lives around events. It doesn't drift towards systematics, it drifts towards events. And I hope we are telling the grand narrative of Jesus Christ, that because of our sin, he died on the cross. In his power, he rose from the dead as the defining capital E event. It actually happened. The resurrection is a true story. It's a true event. And now we are raised from the dead as well in self-defining. The little e event that defines us is when we were raised from the dead. Because Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people live. And so we have been made alive with Christ. Our eternity doesn't start when we die. It started when we were made alive. Now, Jesus is king. We are helping him to make his kingdom known on earth as it is in heaven. And we do that through our mission. That we are encouraging our community to find hope and transformation in Jesus Christ. And I hope that's the grand narrative that we are holding on to. So I want to offer this up. Here's what we've seen. The book of Job begins once upon a time in a land far, far away, and it invites us to suspend our own belief about the world. And the ancient Israelites, their belief was that if you do good, you're going to get good. That if you do the right things, God will bless you, as though it is morally determined, as though my good actions somehow force God to bless me. That's what they believed, although they wouldn't word it that way, but that's how they believed and lived their lives. And the book of Job is a challenge to that notion, that there is a cosmic forces at work that are unseen to Job and to us, that we don't know and don't understand. And we're challenged to model our lives like Job, to live upright and blameless, even as we don't understand, that we can challenge and fight the systems that we don't fully grasp or know. And we're invited into that space to live in the grand narrative that says the most important event of all of human history is Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead. And I'm going to base everything I do off of that, even though I don't understand it, even though I don't know what's happening around me. And even though I may be trying to do good, my life may be in shambles, but I can still live as though it's true because I believe it is, and that I believe I've been made alive with him. And so you're invited into this space that says, Jesus is alive. It's the most important thing that's ever happened or ever will happen. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, as we embark in the book of Job, I want to pray that you would continue to challenge the narratives that we have, that you would challenge the narratives, the truth that we cling to and hold on to that maybe aren't from you. Would you help us to suspend our worldview and our thoughts about how the world works as we engage in the book of Job? Would you challenge us that we might be like Job's friends and Job and be able to see how God is at work, how you are at work in our lives? And we invite you into this space, Lord, asking this in your name. Amen. Thanks.